All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman, and today's show is going to be a condensed, shortened version of the show. Not going to have time this week to do the full Week 4 game-by-game recap. I'm going to be heading out to Cincinnati on Thursday for my sister's wedding, so I wanted to make sure I had time to get studs and duds done. My weekly picks will be on YouTube this week. So for this show, I'm going to recap Monday Night Football. We're going to talk about Urban Meyer. And then we are going to do my 5 biggest surprises for the upcoming NFL season. We'll do the mailbag, and then we'll be on our way. So let's go ahead and get into the show. If you are watching this on YouTube, please do hit that like button. It really helps grow my channel. I appreciate you in advance. Also, if you are listening to the audio version, wherever you get your podcasts, please do rate and review the show if you have a moment. I appreciate it. So let's go ahead and talk about Monday Night Football and any power rankings adjustments that I need to make, having posted the power rankings yesterday. And the reality is I'm actually not going to make any adjustments to the power rankings this week. I did pick the Chargers to win. I put money on them to cover the spread as well. I just think this game played out about as I expected. When I look at my power rankings, I think these teams are currently in the correct spots. You know, the Chargers, I think you could move up, but like Dallas had a great week, Baltimore had a great week, Cleveland looks awesome. There's just, for a lot of these really good teams, there's not a lot of room for them to go up. And then for the Raiders, it's like, yeah, they lost, but they still came alive in the second half. They've played really good football. I think they are better than the Niners, the Titans, and the Vikings right now. I'm certainly not dropping them any further than that. I would take the Seahawks over them. But yeah, I think we have these teams rated appropriately and no changes off of Monday Night Football. Let's talk about the game a little bit. So from the Chargers' perspective, this is now the second time this year that they've done the anti-Charger way, in that they usually are a team that collapses late in games. And this is, to me, a sign that they are incredibly well coached under Brandon Staley, because in the Chiefs game and now in this game, they have had to basically show a counterpunch to an overwhelming wave of momentum. And I do believe in momentum, especially when you're going against explosive teams like the Chiefs and the Raiders, in which they've done this against. So you watch that Chiefs game, the Chiefs storm back. And how many times have we seen the Chiefs? Patrick Mahomes gets rolling, and they blow you away in the third, fourth quarter, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Well, the Chiefs, almost like blocking a bull rush, reset their feet and drove back, and they beat the Chiefs. And then they did the same thing against the Raiders. They come out, have a great first half, but then the Raiders come out in the second half, throwing the ball around the yard, looking great. And in the fourth quarter, they settled down, they figured some things out defensively, and Justin Herbert continued to make the throws he needed to make to win this game. And they are just such a complete football team, and they're still figuring a few things out. But they showed in this game as well that offensively they can beat you in so many different ways. Their run game's been, I think, continuing to improve with Austin Eckler, who has not always been like thought of for his running ability, but he looks, I don't know, top half as a runner. He looks really good. Obviously a lot of good running backs in the NFL, but they're running the ball well with Eckler when he can stay healthy and be in the game. They can beat you with Eckler in man coverage, on option routes out of the backfield. They have 2 tight ends, and Jared Cook, Donald Parham, even Steven Anderson had a big play for them. Really athletic mismatch problem types of tight ends. And then you have one of the best receiving combos in the NFL with Mike Williams, who's basically been Mike Evans this year, and Keenan Allen. They have just all 3 levels of the offense. They can beat you. And then, of course, Justin Herbert, who's making as many big-time throws as any quarterback in the NFL. The accuracy, the arm talent, he extends plays when he needs to. He has found a nice balance with his pocket presence, when to hang in, when to throw contested catches, when to scramble. Justin Herbert is just unbelievable. I mean, we've said it before and I'll say it again. Like, so many people missed. This is not the quarterback that played at Oregon. And this is a good transition to the Raiders, because this came up on stream last night. Like, I guess sometimes quarterbacks just out of nowhere surprise you and turn into different players, because Herbert in college was not this epic playmaker. Actually, in college, when he started scrambling, he actually made a lot of stupid mistakes, like Trubisky-esque, Blake Bortles-esque, like, what are you doing throws? He's gotten to the NFL, and that's basically disappeared. He's also shown better pocket presence, and like everything has changed about him on the Chargers from his Oregon days. And the same thing applies to Derek Carr this season, who has been such a pleasant surprise as far as his playmaking ability. And I've now seen multiple Raiders fans, with all due respect, like you're entitled to your opinion, but I've seen multiple Raiders fans say this was always Derek Carr, this playmaker, third down guy, that all he needed was playmakers. And I couldn't disagree with you any further. He's had playmakers throughout his career. You know, Crabtree was really good. He's had Cooper. He's had Henry Ruggs last year, who he did not utilize like this. Darren Waller, like, sure, it hasn't been perfect, but like he's had good offensive linemen. Gruden's a great offensive coach. He's had, relative to what some quarterbacks deal with, I don't think weaponry and surrounding core has been the issue with Derek Carr. The issue with Derek Carr has always been, for me, when it's third down, he's rapid-firing checkdowns and just playing in structure and doing, quote-unquote, what he's supposed to do, right? If it's 3rd and 11 and you're running a dig concept with an underneath drag, if they cover the deep dig, you're supposed to throw the drag based on the design of the play. Way more often than not, you'll throw the drag, someone will come up, make the tackle, and you punt, and that does nothing for you. That has not been Derek Carr this year. Derek Carr is playing with that it factor, the big play instincts, knowing when to use his feet, because he's always shown flashes of this stuff, right? And I think that might be what Raiders fans are talking about. Like, yes, I agree. Once, maybe twice a game over the last 3 years, he makes a play, and you're like, yes, Derek Carr, do that more. Well, this season, something has clicked for Derek Carr, and it's kind of similar to Herbert going from Oregon to the NFL, where it's like, I can't explain it, but this is not the quarterback that I've watched for Herbert at Oregon, for Derek Carr over the last 3 years. Like, Derek Carr is getting out of the pocket. He is whipping the ball downfield, and that's when you see the traits shine through, because he's relatively athletic. He's got a strong arm. He's really accurate. And yes, he had a bad first half against the Chargers. Like, I will admit it, it's not the first time. You know, he had a bad first half against the Ravens, and that's probably what's holding him back a little bit right now from being, you know, the top MVP candidate anymore, because I think Kyler Murray has taken that crown. It obviously hurt the Raiders' ability to win this game. He has not been perfect, but I would way rather take this version of Derek Carr than the Derek Carr we've seen in years past, because we're seeing it open up this offense in super exciting ways. A couple other takeaways for the Raiders. Hunter Renfrow is awesome. I've always thought he was underrated, and it's been fun to see him kind of get the recognition he deserves. You know, I think coming into the year, I would have said he's a top 10 slot receiver. I don't know how many people would have said that, but he's a really good route runner. Those little China routes that he's been running in the red zone are like uncoverable. Now people will catch on to that's what he's running, so it's not going to always work, but just the footwork to pull those off is really impressive. Obviously the play he made on special teams to break up the fake punt. I don't know how many players in the NFL have the just kind of football awareness to go and make that play. His ability to like break the first tackle when they do throw it short of the sticks, because every quarterback's going to throw it short of the sticks eventually on third and down, third and Renfrow. You know, it's just nice to have a guy that can, if it's 3rd and 2, you throw it a yard short, he'll make a guy miss and get the yardage he needs. So like, he's just a super crafty slot receiver. So he's been awesome. Now the defense definitely started to, I'm not even like that worried about it, because I think the pass rush was still pretty good last night. They had some injuries at corner, and if you have to put Damon Arnett out there, he's gonna suck, which he did. He got roasted. The clips going around on Twitter on Mike Williams just annihilating Damon Arnett, and unfortunately Justin Herbert missed the ball. It was like the worst play of Herbert's night. Should have been a touchdown. So, there's some concerns in there for the Raiders. Like I said, I rank them 12th in the NFL. They're super competitive. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team because they just have some pockets of weaknesses that some of these more well-rounded teams don't have. The draft picks that I've been critical of, I've been right about that, and many people have. Damon Arnett was just a brutal first-round selection. He was a third, fourth-round corner, no athletic upside. That pick made no sense. Alex Leatherwood was a complete and utter reach. He was one of the biggest reasons the Raiders lost last night. He couldn't swat a fly at right tackle, and Joey Bosa is not a fly. He made Alex Leatherwood look like an undrafted free agent that needs to be benched. Clelin Ferrell is nowhere to be found. So the draft picks that they've made have hurt this team, but they're finding value in other ways as well. So I don't want to drone on about that, but you look at Damon Arnett, Alex Leatherwood, they were a big part in that team losing last night. So, Raiders I think will be just fine. They got beat by a better team, in my opinion, on the road. And, there was a lot of Raiders fans there, so I don't know if it was truly on the road. But yeah, that's my Monday Night Football breakdown. I don't think my opinion on either team has changed a ton. Although every time the Chargers show that continuity and how well coached they are, I think you give them a thumbs up and applaud Brandon Staley, and it's building up to something really special for the Chargers. So let's talk about Urban Meyer, because this situation in Jacksonville has gotten even far worse than I possibly could have imagined. After 2 weeks ago, I said that I do not think he makes it through, or at least to his second season in Jacksonville. And the reason I said this on the podcast 2 weeks ago was really an NFL coach. It can be a good NFL head coach in at least one of three ways. The best do it in all three. Number one is set the tone. Be a culture guy. And very clearly, through the first, at that point, and now even further with this most recent situation that we will discuss, through an 0-4 start, this team very clearly has not bought into what Urban Meyer is selling. So not a culture guy. You can be an X's and O's guy, a scheme guy, a guy that makes things easier and makes your players look better. Belichick on the defensive side of the ball, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan on offense. Very clearly doesn't do those things. We've talked about how many unblocked tackles for loss, be it sacks or in the run game, that they've had in the first 4 weeks. Their blocking schemes stink. Up until the Bengals game, they hadn't done anything to make things easier on Trevor Lawrence. The third way is to really be like a roster building type, a team building type. Identify talent, put them into your scheme, which kind of goes hand in hand with that second point. And he very clearly has not done those things. His offseason was a nightmare, and they traded away C.J. Henderson because he didn't draft him, which was just a horrific trade by all counts of the imagination. So if he's not doing the culture stuff, he's not a schemer, and he sure as hell is not a team builder. I said it 2 weeks ago, what the actual F does Urban Meyer do for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Now, fast forward about 10 days from when I said that, I think about 12 days. And now he has gotten in a scandal again with Urban Meyer. And you're now seeing reports that he's lost the locker room. Players don't take him seriously. He came in to explain this situation. And I should rewind and say that after the Bengals game, he was returning home to Ohio, and he was caught grinding with another woman that's not his wife at the bar, wearing an Ohio State shirt. Like, just classic Urban Meyer crap that when he got hired, people knew that he's a shady character. And here he is yet again. Within like 2 weeks of him getting hired, or at least within a month, they hired their strength coach, who was like under investigation at Iowa for misconduct with players. Just a disaster from the start. They drafted running back in the first round, the C.J. Henderson thing, and then they're terrible on the field as well. So like I said, what the actual F is Urban Meyer doing in Jacksonville? He's ruining the culture. He's ruining the team by getting rid of some of the talented players that they had, and he's making things harder on the field for Trevor Lawrence because his defense sucks, and the offense, he's doing very, very little things creative to make things easier on Trevor Lawrence. So I'm going to beg the question, because Urban Meyer's going to get fired for this. It's spiraling out of control as of this recording. I'm going to finish the podcast about 6 p.m. here on Tuesday, October 5th. I think he'll probably be fired by the end of the night. If not, this is going to end poorly in Jacksonville. I'm going to beg the question of, is Urban Meyer the worst coaching hire in the history of the NFL already? Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm heading out of town early this week. I didn't have time to go back and look at the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. You know, if you guys know of really bad coaching hires, that's why this is a question. Let me know in the comments below if there was some crazy stuff that happened way back in the day that I'm not aware of. But at least in the modern era, let's say 2000 on, I think it's very clear that Urban Meyer is the worst hire in, I'm just going to say NFL history, because I don't know of anything that was this bad. You know, there's coaches that kind of had controversy. I think it was Bobby Petrino in early 2000s, had like a 3-10 team and left for college football in like a really suspicious way that really left a bad impression. I honestly, this doesn't happen very often with NFL coaches. Usually these guys are very put together and don't get into scandals off the field. So it's very unique in that way. Of course, there's coaches that ruined their roster, guys like Bill O'Brien. John Gruden has had some shakiness, but at least those guys, or at least Bill O'Brien did for a few years. He kind of fell off once he went from offensive mind to general manager. That's really when he fell apart. But at least Bill O'Brien, he went to the playoffs with, I don't even remember who his quarterback was. It wasn't Chad Henne, but it was like something like that. It was a really bad quarterback. Like, he was a good offensive coach. He just was a really bad team builder. Obviously, a nightmare for the Houston Texans, but I don't think it's as bad as what's going on in Jacksonville right now. John Gruden is a heck of an offensive mind, even if he drafts a guy like Damon Arnett, who, by the way, oh my God, I almost threw up just thinking about him being a first-round pick a year ago. But at least John Gruden's a great offensive coach. So he's combining those two things, scandal, team building, and then on the field, they're 0-4. They suck. So if you want to stack them up with the Freddie Kitchens of the world, the Adam Gases of the world, he's literally no better than those guys. The Jags have been a complete disappointment in every regard. So I'm going to say yes, Urban Meyer, before he's even been fired at this point, is the worst head coaching hire in the history of the National Football League. And if there's one saving grace for Jags fans here, it's that this is the best case scenario for Trevor Lawrence. Get him out of the building. Get the fraud out, and you get a redo on the coaching hire. And you are so blessed, Jacksonville, that Joe Brady didn't get a job, that Eric Bieniemy didn't get a job, and that Brian Daboll didn't get a job, because there's some very good coaching candidates coming up for this upcoming offseason. And now it's just about don't ruin Trevor Lawrence in these next, what do we got, 13 games left? Because they sure as hell ain't making the playoffs. So don't ruin Trevor Lawrence and hit the reset button next year. Maybe even just send him south a little bit. Go hang out in Cabo for the next 3 months, Trevor Lawrence, and watch film until we get back to next year, because this thing is going to get a little bit worse before it gets better in Jacksonville. But my goodness, I didn't like the Urban Meyer hire. Most people didn't. I don't think anybody could have imagined that it would have been this bad. And barring, some coaching hire that I'm not aware of, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, I do think this has been the worst hiring of a head coach in NFL history. And it was bad at the time. A guy that was out of football for 3 years, never had success at the NFL level, very clearly got into the NFL and didn't understand what the valuable positions were, what schemes he should run, and very clearly didn't have his life put together off the field either. So, Urban Meyer, an absolute definition of a dumpster fire for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now we're going to move on with the podcast and talk about my top 5 biggest surprises in the 2021 NFL season so far. So this has really been an outstanding first quarter or so of the season. It's not even a quarter of the way through because we get a week 17 now, but you get the point. We've had close games. We've had a lot of parity, upsets, you name it, just awesome NFL football, and it's been a reminder of why the NFL is king. Been great to have fans back, you name it. But I want to talk about my 5 biggest surprises from the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. Some of these will be good, some of these will be bad, and they're not necessarily in any particular order, but let's get into it. And the first thing I want to talk about is how the Dallas Cowboys are a complete football team. Coming into the year, I knew that they'd be able to throw the football. I knew that their offense was going to be really good. Dak's awesome. They've got, the second best receiving core in the NFL, I would say, behind Tampa Bay. You could argue Kansas City because Tyreek and Kelsey are just on another planet. But, Dallas has outstanding playmakers. But what's been so different about the Dallas Cowboys and so surprising is how well-rounded they are as a team and how everything they're doing is complementing how good they are passing the football. Offensively, notably, how good they have been running the ball. The offensive line has been outstanding. We knew they had talent on that side of the ball, but it's been a little shaky. And so far, even without Lyle Collins at right tackle, in a game without Zach Martin at right guard to kick off the year, and in that first game without him, they did not run the ball very well. But for the rest of the season, they've been running the ball, I want to say like the best team in the NFL. I don't know what the numbers say, but they run the ball extremely efficiently. They have 2 outstanding backs. I mean, Zeke is in shape and looks quick and sharp and has juice, but obviously Tony Pollard has been even better on a per carry basis. They have a great running game. They have a great passing game. The play calling has been extraordinary. With Kellen Moore in there, getting creative in different ways, different screens and different ways to run the ball. They ran a triple option to seal the game last week, really, where I don't remember exactly what the formation was, but it was almost like a wing T deal, where they handed the ball on like a jet sweep to either Pollard or Zeke, and then they had the option to pitch it to the other guy. It's just super creative, really impressive offensive football all around, but not just that. The surprise being the defense. Dan Quinn getting this team at least competent on that side of the ball. And there's been points in the season where the Cowboys' defense has been very good. So they get Micah Parsons in the draft. He's contributed as this kind of elite pursuit tackle player, coming off the edge a little bit, playing some linebacker. Just the way I described it on Studs and Duds last week, the dude is just everywhere. And they're deploying his athleticism in so many great ways. They drafted Osa Odigizua in the mid-rounds, and he's been getting after the quarterback, playing the run up front. Their linebackers have been good. And then in the secondary, you get a Trayvon Diggs to step up and play like one of the best corners in the NFL this year. They bring in DeMonte Kazee, Malik Hooker becoming a part of the rotation, Jaron Kearse patching up that safety room for nothing, which has been just really good team building from, I suppose, the Jones family and Mike McCarthy, and putting this roster back together. And the Dan Quinn hiring has been exceptional as well. Just getting a scheme in place where these guys can play faster and have less coverage busts. All around, the Dallas Cowboys have been a pleasant surprise. And I know I only had them 9th in my power rankings. That's going to be another surprise, and I might as well just talk about that next. My next surprise is that there are 10 legit Super Bowl teams in the NFL. So I've gotten, people say I'm way too low on the Cowboys. I don't feel like I'm low on the Cowboys. They have been awesome. And they are absolutely in the Super Bowl picture. But that is my next surprise, is that this is one of the most, I don't even want to say top heavy, because I think that a lot of teams are just really good right now. But there are actually 10 teams right now that I can picture winning the Super Bowl. And I don't think I would say that about years past. So these teams are the top 10 teams from Monday's power rankings. The Chargers, the Cowboys, the Ravens, the Browns, the Bills, the Packers, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Bucks, and the Chiefs. Sure, there's always teams, like the Seahawks. Like, yeah, Russ can go on a run. That's about it, but that shows you how deep it is. There's usually in that 7 to 10 range teams that are more like the Raiders and the Seahawks and the Niners right now, where it's like, yeah, they're really good, but let's be honest, like things would have to really fall in place for them to win a Super Bowl. I think we have 10 legitimate teams that can go head-to-head with anybody else in that top class and win a Super Bowl. And that's super fun. Like, we are getting so many outstanding matchups on a week-to-week basis that's like, oh, that could be a Super Bowl matchup, or that could be the conference championship matchup. And as long as these teams stay healthy, we are headed for, I think, one of the more exciting just first couple rounds of the playoffs and all the way through. I think the NFL playoffs this year are going to be unbelievable. So just as someone that's been covering this league in depth since 2016, I do think this is the deepest group of Super Bowl contenders in the NFL that I've seen. So soak it up and enjoy some good football, and we've already gotten a lot of it. So that is a surprise. Now, before we do my next surprise, I do want to do an honorable mention on Derek Carr. We talked about Monday Night Football, a little bit slower start, but still came alive in the second half. I had Derek Carr. I talked about him as my number one MVP candidate last week. That's got to be Kyler Murray now. But the way he's making big plays, we saw more of it on Monday Night Football. He has been a huge, pleasant surprise. I wanted to talk about some other stuff because I have talked a lot about Derek Carr so far, but he deserves an honorable mention here. My next surprise, my third biggest surprise, is that the Arizona Cardinals are not just really good, they are really physical. That's been the deal under the Cliff Kingsbury regime so far, is they've been this kind of Big 12 culture in a lot of ways. They've had bad run defenses, and they haven't ran the ball particularly effective. It kind of came alive a little bit last year, but even then it was like in weird ways. It was how much Kyler Murray was keeping the ball, and now it's like they are actually dominating the line of scrimmage. They're tackling well. They're rushing the passer. They're blocking up front. And that's how you can go and beat a team like the Rams. And it's going to allow them to be in that Super Bowl picture, because when you get into the playoffs, not only does the intensity pick up, but just from a mathematical approach, it's really tough to beat 4 straight playoff teams, or 3 straight if they keep this up, get that first round bye. It's really tough to win that many straight games when you're losing the point of attack. Just the core of football makes that very difficult. And the Cardinals, to this point, have been playing really physical. So I think you give Cliff Kingsbury credit. I think you give the front office credit as well for bringing in the right players. And I think you got to give those players credit as well. I think the J.J. Watt and Rodney Hudson additions have been significant towards this increased intensity for the Arizona Cardinals. And the cool thing is this is all on top of the great finesse stuff that they already have, right? And they've got Kirk in the slot playing fast and explosive. They got Rondale Moore. They have Hopkins, obviously what Kyler Murray is doing. But yeah, back to the Rodney Hudson and J.J. Watt additions. These are like world-renowned, or at least league-renowned, like elite leaders of a locker room. And they're both in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Like, this was exactly what this team needed, was tone setters up front. Even if JJ hasn't been like an elite pass rusher, he has been a very good run defender. And do you remember that press conference that I played the audio of on the podcast last year for the Houston Texans? Like, this guy will get anybody to play their most aggressive physical football on Sundays, because he just exudes leadership and intensity. So just the Arizona Cardinals, pleasantly surprising with their physicality that has been a match made in heaven with all of the other nice stuff they do as far as more modern finesse football. It's been a beautiful blend. My fourth surprise here is actually a negative conversation about the Washington football team and their defense. So I ranked Washington with the second ranked defense heading into the season, and I said they had the potential to be an elite game-wrecking defense and the best defense in the NFL. I think I ranked their pass rush second behind the Pittsburgh Steelers after the Melvin Ingram signing there, and they have really dropped the ball almost at all 3 levels. It's been incredibly disappointing and frustrating to watch this team, because you look up front, and they are okay up front. Like, I'm not saying they've busted and like just aren't any good, but the expectations were that Chase Young was going to be a like defensive player of the year type of player. He hasn't been. He's been good, but he's been like, a quality starter. He hasn't even been like an elite edge rusher or anything like that. The interior guys have been pretty good, but even then, not like game wreckers. And Montez Sweat has kind of, I would say, been okay, but also was a player that I thought if the other guys were going to be elite, that he could really take that step up and look really good too. So again, they haven't been bad, but they sure as hell have not been the game-wrecking force up front that I thought they could be. And they're not using Matthew Ioannidis in creative ways either. He's like an interesting fifth rotational piece in there. So that's been disappointing. And then the linebacking core, they bring in Jamin Davis, and they're not really using him. They're throwing John Bostic out there, who's just getting roasted in coverage. I think that's a poor coaching decision, or they whiffed on Jamin Davis, one of the two. And then the secondary hasn't been very good either. They bring in William Jackson, was supposed to be an upgrade to Ronald Darby, who went to Denver. He has been worse than Ronald Darby was last year so far. Kendall Fuller has not been good. Their slot corner hasn't been particularly good. Cameron Curl has been their best cover player so far as that high safety. And Landon Collins has not had a very good season either. So they are actually like a very average to bad defense. Like, they're giving up a ton of yards, a ton of points, and it's a huge surprise. I looked at Ron Rivera as a great defensive coach, a leader of men, and the talent that they had. They've had to win games by Taylor Heineke just pulling stuff out of his ass, and that's been a huge surprise. My number one, well, I guess my last surprise, I don't think it's the biggest surprise. I would say it's actually probably the least surprising thing on this list. But a very pleasant surprise has been the way that the Baltimore Ravens are winning football games for a variety of reasons. The Ravens are 3-1, and they've won games on the heels of Lamar Jackson. I don't want to say playing hero ball, because a lot of the stuff he's doing is in structure, but he is like carrying the offense right now. And I don't want this to I really don't want this to come off as like I didn't believe in Lamar Jackson. I'm surprised to see him having success, because I did think he had a good chance of taking some of those steps up. I think people even told me I was too high in the Ravens coming into the year. But you combine the fact that they've had all these injuries, right? They lost Marcus Peters on the defensive side of the ball. And that's part of this surprise, is how good the defense has been despite losing Peters, with how good Jason Owe has been, Odafe Owe, sorry. So the defense has been surprisingly good. That's been a bit of a surprise. I thought that group would be struggling with Marcus Peters, but Averett's playing well, and Owe is playing well, so those have been surprises. But back to the offense, I like the way this thing projected. But coming into the year, they lose all three of their running backs, which the Ravens are the most run-intensive team in the league. Like, they craft their offense around the run game, and they've had a bad run game. Teams have really found out how to defend the read option, be it scrape exchanges, be it different formations. Teams have been forcing the Ravens to win on offense in different ways, and they know that. They've had success in other ways as well. That goes back to last year. But you also then take away the running backs that they've kind of, picked for their system. They go to Latavius Murray, who just doesn't have the same juice as Gus Edwards. I thought he would, but he doesn't have that same, speed train style hitting the hole. He's been fine, but they lose Dobbins, who they had hopes for. They even lose the Oklahoma State kid, who's got a lot of juice. So they're leaning on Latavius Murray, who's fine. They're leaning on Tyson Williams, who they need to play more, by the way. And then they have Le'Veon Bell, who's just been a shell of himself for years. And the run game has actually been pretty poor for the Ravens. So they've really had to resort to the passing game. And then they don't have Rashad Bateman in there, right? So, they've had all these injuries. I am pleasantly surprised. I know I'm kind of talking in circles right now, but I am pleasantly surprised that the Ravens have, within a month of the season, completely sort of reformed how they need to win and which players they need to lean on to win. I think Lamar is making excellent reads. He's delivering some beautiful balls all around the field, outside the numbers, deep over the middle, where he's always been accurate. So that's been a great surprise. I think Lamar's pocket presence has shown some improvements as well. But for them to really change the way they need to win and find out the certain players that are next man up so quickly has been a pleasant surprise. So I hope I did an okay job explaining kind of why the Ravens and how they're winning football games has been such a pleasant surprise, but definitely worthy of making this list. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will get into the Patreon mailbag. So we are going to wrap up the podcast here with the Patreon mailbag. We've got about 20 questions ahead, so still some good content ahead here. I do want to remind you that this show is brought to you by my Patreon. It's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can support this show. You can support my channel in the biggest of ways. I owe everything to my patrons. This channel would not exist without your support there. So thank you for those that have supported me and those that are considering signing up. So you'll support the show. You'll get exclusive content. You'll get access to submit questions to this very mailbag for the show. You'll get my weekly picks, and you will at some point be getting film breakdowns. This month has been just crazy with travel and weddings, and it's just been an unbelievably busy time in my life. So I will be getting film breakdowns up, at least one here in October. I owe the MVP patrons that. So thank you, MVP Patreon, for your patience. I will be getting those film breakdowns up. But yeah, that's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, and I appreciate you in advance for checking it out. So let's get into the mailbag. This is from Honk Boy, Twitch favorite. What's up, my dude? Do you have any thoughts on the Henderson trade after the reasoning came out? Apparently, Henderson has friends and family in Florida that were treating him poorly, asking for money, etc., etc. The logic being that Henderson needed a change of scenery. Does that make any sense for the trade? Yeah, I mean, it gets sticky when a guy has off-field concerns, and you know, I would just say that the good organizations that find players that have off-field troubles, it doesn't sound like that's the worst thing in the world. Like, I think you do what you can to help a guy out off the field instead of just giving up on him, especially a guy with the talent of a C.J. Henderson. If he's a fifth-round pick and was playing like he's been playing, sure, I get it. Like, give him the change of scenery that he needs. But look at, like, the Cowboys come to mind with what they did with Dez Bryant. I know that kind of makes me... I haven't heard of this with Henderson, so I don't know the details, but the Cowboys like hired someone to be like a life coach for Dez Bryant, and it totally worked. So I think you have to like adapt to situations, and they sold and they got nothing for him. And I think the Panthers are a team that will do something like that. So it doesn't really change my opinion. It just sounds like a cop-out, in my opinion. From Joe, this actually isn't a mailbag question, but I can answer it. Just wondering if you can do another coaching carousel video like last year. Yes, I will be discussing coaching carousel in a podcast like later on as we get a more clear picture of like who's going to be out and who the true top contenders are. We know Joe Brady, Bieniemy, and Dable are going to be like the top elite candidates, and we know Jacksonville's going to be open. Those would be good options for Jacksonville, but beyond that, we just don't have enough information. But yes, I will absolutely be doing coaching discussions, probably closer to like week 16, week 17. From Jack, what do I tell my brother when he says Chase Young and Khalil Mack aren't good because of sacks? I mean, to be rude, like your brother needs to educate himself about pressures and why pressure stats are so important. I mean, sacks are only a piece of the picture, and you pushing the pocket and forcing quarterbacks to either move and walk into other sacks or just speed up their process, which often leads to interceptions. Pressure is it sounds like a subjective, intangible stat. It's really not. There's now two major companies that put out pressure numbers, ESPN and Pro Football Focus. There's a formula for why these things happen. There's an element of consistency to what counts as a pressure, and every single pressure is forcing the quarterback to either move or get rid of the football. And that can be even more valuable than a sack. If you force a pressure and a quarterback gets rid of the ball and throws it into double coverage, that's way more valuable than a sack. So it's it's a tangible piece of evidence that we now have. This isn't 2010 where all you have is sacks to go off. You got to use all the information available, and pressures are, also a better predictor of future sacks to come. You'll see players all the time having 5 sacks on 11 pressures, and then all of a sudden they stop getting sacks. It's like, what happened? Well, it turns out he just had some fluky plays in there. So, sorry to be rude to your brother, but he needs to get with the times. From Patrick, what do I want most to happen in the NFL, team/player-wise? For example, my biggest wish is for Seattle to let Pete Carroll go so that you can unlock Russell Wilson. I think mine would be to reunite Joe Brady with Joe Burrow, because I just don't think Zach Taylor's it. He put together a good game plan against the Jaguars, but it just kind of speaks for itself. When you watch the Bengals play, they don't have the same structure and plan of attack that the well-coached offensive coach, well-coached teams. Why can't I figure out how to say this? But you get what I'm saying. The well-coached offensive teams, I suppose. They don't have that in Cincinnati. So I think that's the first thing that came to my mind, was pairing Joe Brady with Joe Burrow in the future, which, if Burrow keeps playing like this, he's going to save Zach Taylor's job. From Tyler, so I'm guessing what we're learning is that Matt Nagy can't call plays. Yeah, Matt Nagy is starting to kind of be the Urban Meyer thing that we talked about. What is it that you do here? Because you don't call plays. This is the second time they've taken that away from you, and the game just opens up for your team. He's not a defensive guy. Roster building wise, I think that's mostly in Ryan Pace's hands anyway. But I wouldn't say Nagy's been a genius in that department. And culture wise, I don't know. I think he's a decent leader, but I don't think he's John Harbaugh or anything. So yeah, it's I think Nagy behind Urban Meyer right now is on the hottest of seats. From Tomsky, Myles Garrett is just ridiculous, isn't he? Can we compare him to Aaron Donald yet? Yes. I've been saying that this week, actually, on Twitter here and there, that it's time. Myles Garrett is wrecking games like Aaron Donald does. He's the best edge rusher that we've seen, I would say. Myles, Khalil Mack in 2018 or whatever that huge year was for the Bears, probably this is the best edge performance we've seen since then, and that was game-wrecking defensive player of the year type stuff. So, Garrett was my pick for defensive player of the year in part because of voter fatigue with Aaron Donald, but at this point, he's actually impacting games even more through the first 4 weeks than Aaron Donald. Now, Garrett has played much worse offensive lines, so we'll see if it sustains. But I do think it is fair now to say that Myles Garrett is in the same conversation with Aaron Donald, who has been a little bit slower this year. Not on the field. He still looks great. I'm just talking about production-wise. He's been a little bit down. But Donald's still, I would say, the best player in football. But you can definitely say Myles Garrett's in the conversation. From Will, do you feel Trayvon Diggs' 5 picks are more of a result of luck or his own play and skill and coverage? I feel like he's been making a lot of those plays happen, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on him. He kind of reminds me of Marcus Peters a little bit, because especially last week against the Panthers, Diggs, he did give ups. He gave up a lot of plays. I think he gave 4 or 5 big completions, which is kind of Marcus Peters has done that too. But some corners just have a nose for the football, right? Xavier Howard, J.C. Jackson, Marcus Peters, and that adds a ton of value. Now, all of those guys, they're not the same cover players as guys like, Jair Alexander, I would say Tre'Davious White. There's better cover players, But if you're forcing these turnovers because you're super instinctive and you have both great ball skills and you're a good risk taker, there's an added value in that you're not getting from other players. So I think Trayvon Diggs looks like he's kind of more on that trajectory. He's not an amazing athlete. Like, his ability to run with the best athletes in the world, I think over time, he's going to have some ups and downs, just as basically every corner does. But just like a Xavier Howard, if he's getting you 6-7 picks because he's a risk taker and has great ball skills, that's also incredibly valuable. So I think Xavier Howard's actually a very good up-and-coming comp for what we're seeing from Trayvon Diggs so far. As far as the actual picks that he's had, they're not luck. Lucky picks to me are either, the quarterback was under pressure and he threw it right to you, or the ball was deflected. Obviously, there's an element of variance as far as opportunities to get interceptions, but these were opportunistic picks that not a lot of corners make. There was he jumped a zone against Sam Darnold. A couple of his picks, he's just found the ball and wrestled it away. He had the one, I think it was in the Chargers game, where he was trailing and laid out and somehow made a great pick. So they're very good plays on the football. These are not ball deflected lands in his lap, or he's just standing there in zone and the quarterback makes a terrible read. So I wouldn't say his picks have been lucky. They've been very impressive, and I mean, comparing him to Xavier Howard is very high praise, I would say. From Jose, can you try and predict a few players that might get traded away at the deadline this year? Also, can you confirm with a Raiders win today that it's going to be a Cardinals versus Raiders Super Bowl? Well, we didn't get the win, so I'm sorry, Jose. So traded away, I think, Marlon Mack is on the block. It's tough to kind of come up with these on the fly. But you're looking at bad teams that have older players, typically, or guys in contract years. Maybe C.J. Mosley could become available for the Jets. I could see James Washington for the Steelers finally, a deal being reached there. Yeah, it's tough. Those are a couple names that come to my mind. Typically, offensive linemen don't become available. Teams like to keep those. So yeah, there's just a couple names for you. From Luke, what do you think is the best course of action for the Steelers to replace Big Ben? So, and then he asks, what do you think the organization actually will do? So what I think the organization will do is some combination of Dwayne Haskins competing next year and then either drafting a quarterback in the first round or signing a Mariota type of quarterback or a Jimmy Garoppolo, something like that, go the veteran route. And I could see Mariota or Jimmy Garoppolo working in that system because both those guys are pretty efficient in the short game and they have all these playmakers. That's kind of the offense they run. So I wouldn't rule that out being a good move for them. And Dwayne Haskins is kind of that same type of field general, get rid of the ball quick and accurate. So I think those are some options for them. As far as the draft goes, I haven't been very impressed by this crop. I haven't watched them yet, but I do know that it's a very deep group. There's 6 quarterbacks kind of in contention for a first-round grade right now. So if the Steelers end up picking 10th, if there's a guy there that they really like that the rest of the NFL didn't like, that's absolutely going to be an option for them. So what I would do is all 3. I would draft a guy, I would sign a Garoppolo or trade for a Garoppolo or a Mariota, and I would bring in Dwayne Haskins and just let them all compete. And maybe you have an option for next year to keep you competitive with a veteran, and you have a really nice situation that's conducive to a Malik Willis or Carson Strong or whoever it is to then develop and become the QB of the future. So my plan at quarterback is darts, man. I'm whipping darts at that position until you figure it out. And I think that's probably pretty close to what the Steelers do. But obviously it's it for Big Ben. From Devontae, are the Texans as bad as the 2019 Dolphins, where you're going to put a college team at 32 in the power rankings again? Potentially. Definitely potentially. I like making that bit every year. But yeah, they've bottomed out. Now, when they get Tyrod back, they have some energy. But yeah, with Davis Mills in there, they are 2019 Dolphins bad, I think. Whether or not I make the bit this year, we'll see. From Nate or Nathaniel, what do I think of Najee Harris's workload? Talented back being overused behind a bad O-line. Has Saquon written all over it. Well, I don't think he's Saquon Barkley talented. Saquon's a little different, but he is incredibly talented. He looks really good. And I agree, like, he is getting overworked, but he does a lot of fun stuff in the receiving game, too. I don't know. I guess I'm not surprised to see them feed him so much. They spent that pick on him. They thought he was going to be this kind of chain-moving, bruising back that can do all these different things. So I like the usage. You wish the blocking was a little better, of course. But with how bad Big Ben is, but outside of them like throwing the ball to him 5 yards short of the sticks on fourth down, like I'm fine with the workload. I also think because of his size, I'm not so much worried about him like wearing down. It's kind of like in the same realm of like Derrick Henry. You're always risking injury every time a running back touches the football, but I don't really have any true issues with Najee Harris's workload because the passing game is so bad. And I think if the defense starts playing better, it'll make a little more sense as well, which I think is very possible. Okay, from Nicholas Craig, as a Patriots fan, I'm happy we have Mac Jones, but what receiver or playmaker would be best for helping him become the heir apparent to Captain Kirk Cousins? Well, they don't have like they don't have a one. They don't have an X that can do everything. You got a deep threat. You got a couple slot guys. They need like Michael Gallup, maybe. I think will be available. You know, it's tough to know exactly who's going to be available. If Chris Godwin becomes available because he hasn't had the biggest year for the Bucs, like that would be unbelievable. But you know, like a true number one style receiver that can go deep, win short, win in the intermediate game. That's once you get that, then Aguilar looks better as a deep threat. Then, you know, Bourne and what's his name? 16, Myers. Then they look better. The tight ends open up underneath more, but I always think you got to start with that X. So that would probably be or in the draft, or you draft a, you know, good receiver. There's been great receivers every year. So maybe it's the Ohio State kid or one of the two Ohio State kids, the Bama kids. Like looks like it's going to be another pretty good receiving class. Good to see Justin Ross get back on the field recently too, by the way, after neck issues there for Clemson. Okay, from Costa, this may sound weird, but I was actually really impressed with the Texans' defense against Buffalo. Second half meltdown should be attributed to the defense being on the field for the entire game. Fair. There was, I think, 4 interceptions. So, yeah, I haven't watched the game yet. That's the last one on my list. I've watched everything else. That thing, just brutal. But, yeah, I will say from what I've seen for the other 3 weeks, the Texans' defense is playing really physical. I think they're getting some guys to step up front. Secondary, it's, I guess, not the worst in the NFL. They've had some good moments for the Texans of guys stepping up. And, yeah, I think, I don't know, with Tyrod Taylor out there, it's a watchable football team. But right now, like I said, I haven't even gotten to the game yet, unfortunately. From Matthew Bramble, could the Steelers be a dark horse favorites to trade for Rodgers or Watson? I mean, definitely. I mean, they're Super Bowl contenders if they can pull that off. You know, Rodgers, I do think Rodgers wants to go west. You know, he married a Hollywood superstar. I think he wants to be close to California where he kind of lives and just he kind of loves that life, right? He wants to be the Jeopardy host, and he's talked about wanting to be a director in the future. I really think Rodgers wants to go west. So Denver, Raiders, like that. I think there's a reason those were the teams that he said. But, you know, I just don't know if the Steelers are a big upgrade to what he has in Green Bay. You know, it's still cold weather football, Pittsburgh, Green Bay, like, you know, blue collar towns or whatever. Ultimately, Rodgers will have to want to go there. So I don't know about Rodgers, but Watson 100%. 100% could see Watson being a sleeper spot for the Steelers, I guess. From Will Smithy, what do I think the Dolphins' ceiling could be if they acquired Watson? We got a couple of Watson questions here. And would this be the right move, assuming the legal stuff gets cleared up? From a football perspective, yes. I mean, you make the move. They have extra first-round picks, and I just think Tua. You guys know my stance on Tua. I don't think Tua is it. I want to see more from him, but if you can get a quarterback like Deshaun Watson and you're comfortable with the off-field stuff, that's the thing that, that's not my job, right? My job is not to sort through whatever legal drama there is, get an off-field evaluation of Deshaun Watson, and tell you if I was the owner of an NFL franchise, if I could look my fans in the face and say, we're acquiring this guy. That's not my job. I'm glad that's not my job. But strictly from a football perspective, 10 trillion% yes, that would be the best move the Dolphins could make. And what their ceiling is a Super Bowl contender. I mean, they need to figure out a couple more offensive linemen, but all of a sudden, we've seen what Watson can do with Will Fuller. I think it'd be a little bit better with Jalen Waddle as well than what he's getting with Tua and Jacoby Brissett. The offense would blow off the doors. Watson also knows what he wants to do. He'll help the offensive coordinators be better. We way too often don't talk enough about how much quarterbacks can impact play calling and scheme. It would open up the offense in unimaginable ways, and we know that defense can ball out. They're only, I think, getting better. So it turns them into, I would say, Super Bowl contenders within a year. Now you have less capital to go and get an offensive lineman, but I would say the draft will become harder because you're not going to have as many picks. But free agents will want to go there. If there's a top tackle, they'll go and block for Deshaun Watson, absolutely. From Patrick Hill, why does Washington insist on paying press man corners and playing them in zone-heavy schemes, starting to get Josh Norman overpay vibes from the William Jackson signing? That's a good point. William Jackson is kind of that bump and run man coverage style. And yeah, he has struggled in off zone coverage. I think the thinking there was it allows you to run more man coverage when you want to, but also that Ron Rivera probably thought he could coach up William Jackson to be a better zone corner. And maybe we see that. I still like William Jackson. He's been average so far. But new system, maybe it is a deal that he just needs to see some more action. I don't know. I like the signing. He has been surprisingly poor, though. We talked about Washington's defense being severely disappointing so far. So I don't necessarily mind the process. It just hasn't worked to this point. And I think it's a combination of a lot of different things in Washington. I really like their front office. I think they've done a really good job. I mean, they were seriously one of the worst teams in football just a year ago. And they're obviously not playing very well, but I still really like the roster talent. From Adam, if the NFL wants to take away the salary cap, obviously a theoretical question, which teams do I believe would be heavy spenders? I mean, the Saints would own the NFL. I would have a significantly less. I would have a serious drop off in interest in the NFL. This is. I don't know if you guys knew this about me, but I would maybe even end up changing careers if the NFL removed the salary cap, because I think that the hard cap that the NFL has, and obviously some teams find workarounds, but there's still evidence of teams that have to make tough decisions. I think a hard cap and the franchise tag is the underlying reason for why the NFL is king. Obviously, the game itself is incredibly, I think, more entertaining. You got fantasy football. It's just one game per week. There's other factors in there. A lot of reasons why football is so amazing. But the fact that it's not like baseball or it's not like basketball where you can just buy a team and everyone kind of has the same money. Like every owner in the NFL is stupid, filthy rich. And for the most part, they're willing to spend money. There's a couple of pockets where some guys have gotten cheap, but I feel like we don't really see that so much anymore. It's the biggest reason why there's so much polarization in the league, and teams go from, they fluctuate so much. We're watching Red Sox Yankees tonight. Surprise, In the NFL, it's like, is Arizona the best team in football right now? Like, they had cap space this year. They were able to go in. Maybe 2 years from now, that bites them in the butt. Well, they have to pay Kyler Murray. Their window could close. I love that aspect of the NFL. If they took the salary cap out, I think I would slowly lose interest in the NFL in the same way that I've completely lost interest in the NBA. Also, just an idea for future podcasts, ranking NFL logos. Maybe an off-season topic. I like it. A little too much going on during the season to focus on logos, I think, but I like the suggestion. What would it take for you to be higher on Dak? A ton of analysts think he's a definite top 10 QB, whereas oftentimes you kind of wave him off being 10 to 13. So for Dak, I've been impressed by him. I think he has one of the easier jobs, if not the easiest job in the NFL right now. His pass protection's been at the top of the league. They have an elite run game. The defense is playing well. He's all these great playmakers. And he plays a style that, like, to his credit, is like very conducive to like utilizing those playmakers. I think he's one of the 5 best processing quarterbacks in the NFL. He doesn't make mistakes. And I'm coming around on like his pocket presence a little bit. That's kind of always been my big deal with Dak. But again, he's not under a ton of pressure behind that offensive line this year. And even in the Eagles game, he took a strip sack, touchdown, safety. One of the few times he got pressured in that game. I think he got pressured 8 times against the Carolina Panthers pass rush. Let me pull this up. But that was a play that, you downgrade him for, was the strip sack touchdown against the Eagles. Now, they battled back. He played great. I think, because this all came up when I said that I would rather have Joe Burrow than him. I do genuinely believe, if you change spots, I think you compare arm talent, I think they're very close. I think accuracy-wise, they're very close. I think Burrow had some rough goes with accuracy last year, but he's looked good this year. He was elite at it in college. I'm not worried about his deep ball. I think processing-wise, Burrow is rare in that department. I think he's shown that from the second he stepped on an NFL field. Dak is also rare in that department. But when I look at pocket presence, play extension, and ability to like improvise and add, I'd rather have Joe Burrow. I do think they're very close. I was surprised by the amount of just outcry there was when I said that. I was genuinely surprised. I thought people were higher on Joe Burrow like I am. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL right now. But let's pull up Dallas against the Panthers, who have been getting after everybody. The Panthers had, 8 pressures. They've been one of the best pass rushing teams in the NFL. Dallas held them to 8 pressures because they were running the ball like crazy. To Dak's credit, he does get rid of the ball quickly, but how much of that is because he's in a situation where he's allowed to do that? So, I think Dak has a lot of opportunities this year as the season goes on to become more of a consensus top 10 quarterback for me. But that also means he's got to pass guys like Herbert. The Burrow thing, I'm not going to die on that hill. I think he's right there, 10, 11, 12. I did include Deshaun Watson in my top 10. But, we're talking about Dak's going to have to pass guys like Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert. Those guys are just playing a different brand of football than Dak Prescott. So I don't feel like I hate Dak, even though I think it comes off that way. I just think other quarterbacks add a little bit more, whether it's play extension, arm talent, doing more with less, whatever you want to call it. I guess that's my Dak spiel. So I hope that defends my take. I don't want to revisit that world where I'm critical on Dak. I mean, my God, I got blasted on Twitter. Woo, had to log off on that one. But I hope that explains it. And that's a good way to wrap up the show. So thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'd appreciate it if you could hit that like button down below, as well as leave a review if you're listening to the audio version of the show. I hope you enjoyed, and I should be back tomorrow with Studs and Duds, probably later on in the evening. But until then, peace out, and we'll see you later. Cheers.